The evening sky was his usual spot, a place where important men gathered to discuss business and politics. Though he had once been a simple shepherd traveling with his uncle Abraham, Lot had become a man of some standing in this wealthy city. What he didn't know was that before the next sunrise, everything he had built would crumble. It began with the arrival of two strangers. The men appeared suddenly at the gate as daylight faded. There was something different about them, a quiet dignity, eyes that seemed to hold wisdom beyond mortal years. While others at the gate kept their distance, Lot approached them with the hospitality that had been instilled in him since childhood. "My lords," he said, bowing low before them, "please come to your servant's house, stay the night, wash your feet, and continue your journey in the morning." At first they declined. "No, we will spend the night in the square." But Lot insisted strongly. Something inside warned him that the square was not safe for these visitors. The city of Sodom had grown wealthy, but with that wealth had come corruption. Strangers were no longer protected by the ancient laws of hospitality, but were often treated as prey. "Please," he pressed, "come to my house." Finally, they agreed. Lot's home was spacious, reflecting his prosperity. His wife prepared a meal while their two unmarried daughters helped serve the guests. As they ate freshly baked bread, Lot asked the travelers about their journey, but they were vague in their answers. There was purpose in their presence, but they revealed little about themselves or their mission. As the household prepared for sleep, a disturbance erupted outside. Voices grew louder until they became a roar. Pounding shook the door so violently that dust fell from the ceiling beams. "Lot," voices shouted from outside, "where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us." Lot's blood ran cold. He knew what they wanted. The men of Sodom, young and old alike, had surrounded his house, and their intentions toward the strangers were violent and shameful. Trembling slightly, Lot stepped outside, closing the door behind him to shield his guests. The torchlight revealed faces contorted with desire and rage. These were his neighbors, men he had known for years, now transformed into a mob. "My brothers," he pleaded, "do not act so wickedly." The crowd pressed closer, their faces now threatening. "Stand back," someone shouted. "This man came as a foreigner, and now he's acting as a judge. We'll deal worse with you than with them." They rushed forward, pushing against Lot, reaching for the door behind him. Just as they were about to overpower him, the door opened from inside. Strong hands pulled Lot back into the house as the strangers extended their arms toward the crowd. Suddenly, the men outside cried out in confusion. They staggered about, groping along the walls as though they could no longer see. From the smallest to the greatest, blindness had struck them all. "Do you have anyone else here?" one of the strangers asked Lot urgently. "Sons-in-law, sons, daughters, or anyone else in the city who belongs to you? Get them out of here because we are about to destroy this place." Lot stared at them in shock. "Destroy it? How?" "The outcry against this city has reached the Lord," the visitor explained. "The sins of Sodom have grown so great that he has sent us to destroy it." Now Lot understood. These were no ordinary travelers. They were messengers from God himself, angels disguised as men. Trembling, Lot hurried into the night to the homes of the men pledged to marry his daughters. Finding them awake, gathered with friends despite the late hour, he burst through their doors. "Quick, get up and leave this place," he urged them frantically. "The Lord is about to destroy the city." They looked at him with amusement, then broke into laughter. "You must have had too much wine, father-in-law," one joked. "Go home and sleep it off." No matter how he pleaded, they dismissed his warnings as nonsense. Eventually, Lot returned home, heavy with the knowledge that they would not be saved. As the first light of dawn broke across the eastern sky, the angels became urgent. "Hurry," they insisted, taking hold of Lot's hand, his wife's hand, and the hands of his two daughters. "The Lord has been merciful to you, but you must flee now. Escape for your life. Don't look back, and don't stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the mountains or you will be swept away." Lot hesitated. The mountains seemed so distant, so wild and dangerous. "My lords, please," he begged. "You have shown great kindness to your servant and saved my life, but I cannot flee to the mountains. Disaster would catch up with me there and I would die. Look, there is a small town nearby. Let me flee there. It is very small, isn't it? Then my life will be saved." One of the angels nodded. "Very well, I will grant this request too. I will not overthrow the town you speak of, but hurry, escape there, for I cannot do anything until you reach it." And so they fled, the four of them, as the sun rose over the land. The town Lot had pointed to was called Zor, meaning small place. It was barely visible in the distance as they hurried across the plain. Behind them, Sodom still slept, unaware of its impending doom. The city that had grown wealthy from the fertile plain of the Jordan, known for its abundance and beauty, would soon be nothing but a memory. As they ran, Lot's wife slowed her pace. Perhaps it was fatigue, or perhaps it was reluctance to leave behind the life she had built. Her home contained all her possessions, the fine linens she had collected, the silver vessels she treasured, her friends, her familiar routines, the comfort of a settled life. Everything was being abandoned in this desperate flight. The angel's warning echoed in Lot's mind. Don't look back. He called to his wife and daughters to hurry, not to turn around no matter what they heard. They had just reached the outskirts of Zor when the destruction began. The ground shook beneath their feet. A sound like thunder, but deeper and more terrible, rolled across the plain. The air itself seemed to catch fire. Don't look back, Lot shouted again, pulling his daughters forward. But his wife could not resist. Perhaps it was the deafening roar or the strange light that suddenly flooded the plain behind them. Perhaps it was simply the human need to witness, to see with her own eyes the end of everything she had known. She turned. In that instant, as her eyes beheld the fire and sulfur raining down from the heavens, as Sodom and Gomorrah vanished in flame, she became frozen in place. The minerals in the air, the salt and sulfur carried on the wind of destruction, enveloped her body. In moments, where Lot's wife had stood was now only a pillar of salt, a human figure caught forever in that final moment of disobedience and longing. Lot and his daughters reached Zor just as the full force of destruction hit the cities of the plain. The ground heaved and split. Fire rained from the sky, and thick, black smoke rose up like from a giant furnace. Where Sodom and Gomorrah had stood, with all their splendor and wickedness, there was nothing left but flames and devastation. Safe within the small town, Lot fell to his knees, overwhelmed by what had happened. When he looked back and saw the pillar of salt on the plain, his wife transformed by her backward glance, he wept bitterly. Everything he had accumulated, all the wealth and position he had gained in Sodom, was gone. And now his companion of many years was gone too, preserved only as a mineral monument to the danger of looking back. Fear gripped Lot's heart as they sheltered in Zor. What if God's judgment fell on this town too? Despite the angel's promise, he could not feel at peace there. Every rumble of thunder made him tremble. Every stranger's glance seemed filled with the same wickedness he had witnessed in Sodom. We cannot stay here, he told his daughters after several anxious days. And so they left Zor, climbing the rough paths into the hills until they found a cave that would serve as shelter. From this high vantage point, they could see the entire plain below, now transformed into a wasteland of ash and salt. Where fertile fields had once stretched to the horizon, nothing would grow again for generations. Life in the cave was harsh after the comforts of the city. Lot, once a man of some importance, now huddled by small fires, hunting and gathering to survive. His daughters, raised in prosperity, now collected wild plants and carried water from distant springs. As days turned to weeks, a new fear took hold of Lot's daughters. In their isolation, they saw no other people, no potential husbands. The older daughter especially began to worry. Our father is old, she said to her sister one evening as Lot slept deeply after drinking wine from a small store they had brought from Zor. And there is no man around here to give us children, as is the custom all over the earth. Let's get our father to drink wine and then sleep with him and preserve our family line through him. The younger sister was hesitant but eventually agreed. That night, they gave their father wine until he was too intoxicated to know what was happening. The older daughter went in and slept with him, and he was unaware of it. The next day, the older sister said to the younger, "Last night I slept with my father. Let's get him to drink wine again tonight, and you go in and sleep with him so we can preserve our family line through our father." So they got their father to drink wine that night also, and the younger daughter went in and slept with him. Again, he was unaware of it. In time, both daughters became pregnant by their father. The older daughter gave birth to a son and named him Moab, saying, "He is from my father." Moab would become the father of the Moabites. The younger daughter also had a son, whom she named Ben-Ammi, saying, "He is the son of my people." Ben-Ammi would become the father of the Ammonites. Thus, from an act of desperation and sin came two nations that would later become both allies and enemies to the descendants of Abraham, Lot's uncle who had separated from him long ago. Lot lived out his remaining days in that mountain cave, a shadow of the man he had once been. From prosperity to poverty, from city dweller to cave dweller, his journey had been one of constant descent. Years later, when travelers passed through the wasteland that had once been the cities of the plain, they would tell the story of Lot and point to a particular pillar of salt that resembled a woman looking back. "There stands the wife of Lot," they would say, "who could not let go of Sodom even as God's judgment fell upon it." The story spread throughout the land, carried by caravans and shepherds, told around campfires and in tents as a warning. It became a powerful symbol of the danger of attachment to worldly things in the face of divine command, and of the consequences of hesitation when decisive action is required. Abraham, who had pleaded with God for the righteous in Sodom, rose early the morning after the destruction and looked down toward the cities of the plain. He saw only dense smoke rising from the land, like smoke from a furnace. But he knew that God had remembered him and had rescued Lot from the catastrophe. For generations that followed, the Dead Sea covered much of where the cities had been. Its waters, too salty for fish to live or plants to grow around its shores, became a permanent reminder of the purifying judgment that had fallen there. Travelers would taste its bitter water and remember the bitter end of cities that had turned away from righteousness. And the pillar of salt that had once been Lot's wife stood as a monument to divided loyalties, to the human tendency to cling to what is familiar even when it leads to destruction. Remember Lot's wife? People would caution each other when faced with the need to make a clean break from the past. In time, Lot's name became less prominent in the stories people told, while the image of his wife, frozen in that fatal backward glance, grew more significant. She became a powerful symbol, her transformation from living woman to mineral pillar representing the cost of nostalgia at critical moments of decision. The descendants of Abraham would tell this story to their children and grandchildren, using it to explain not only God's judgment on wickedness, but also the importance of complete obedience. When God calls us to leave something behind, whether a place, a habit, or a way of thinking, looking back can be fatal. The salt pillar stood for many years, weathered by wind and rain but still recognizable as a human figure. Travelers would make detours to see it, to stand in its shadow and contemplate its meaning. Some would leave small offerings, a flower, a stone, a whispered prayer, as though the salt figure could still hear, still witness their respect or their pity. Eventually, time and the elements would reclaim even this monument. Rain would gradually dissolve the salt. Wind would wear away the features that had once marked it as human. But the story remained, preserved not in minerals but in the collective memory of a people trying to understand their relationship with a God who both judges and saves. And so the tale of Lot, of his choice to settle in Sodom, of his rescue by angels, of his wife's transformation and his own decline, became more than just a family history. It became a meditation on choices and their consequences, on mercy in the midst of judgment, and on the price of divided loyalties. The story of Lot and the pillar of salt reminds us that some partings must be complete, that some journeys allow no looking back. It cautions us to consider carefully where we make our home and with whom we cast our lot. Most of all, it teaches that when divine warning comes, complete obedience is the only safe response. Forward motion, not backward glances. In the end, what remains is not the wealth Lot accumulated in Sodom, nor the salt pillar his wife became, but the story itself. A stark reminder that the choices we make and the directions we face can determine not just our own fate, but the legacy we leave for generations to come.